What's up guys, Miles here with 9 to 5 Mac, and another year, another iPhone. Today we finally got the iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max in hand. Today we're going to be going over all of the top features and everything that's been new and improved. So if you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe for our full review coming soon. The unboxing experience for the 13 Pro and Pro Max is very familiar. You've once again got the slimmed down boxes, so you know what that means. No power brick, which for me isn't a huge deal. Inside the box is the phone itself, a 3-foot Lightning to USB-C cable, and some documentation alongside your standard Apple stickers. And I would say that maybe it's time for Apple to spice up the unboxing experience on the iPhone just a little bit. I know this is something that in the grand scheme of things doesn't matter at all, but it could just be one of those little things that makes the Apple experience a bit more memorable. The hardware on the 13 Pro and Pro Max are more or less the same this time around compared to last year's models. The camera lenses are slightly larger, the notch is ever so slightly smaller, but we've got a new color here, and that's Sierra Blue. I'm honestly a little surprised that Apple went with blue for the flagship iPhone color 2 years in a row, but blue must do very well in their test groups or something like that. I personally dig the color. It's not super loud or contrasty, but already being familiar with the general aesthetic of the 12 Pro, I knew this color would be one that looks a lot better in person than in pictures online. And I think that's exactly the case here. A lot of people notably aren't fans of this color compared to last year's Midnight Blue, but I personally think it looks quite nice. Another interesting new hardware change is something that most people probably wouldn't notice from the naked eye, and that's the fact that this year's Pro models are slightly thicker and heavier. For a while, I thought Apple was following a trend of trying to make all of their devices as thin and light as possible, but I think they realized that operating that way probably isn't the best for battery life. So the 13 Pro is now thicker by 0.25 millimeters and heavier by about 15 grams. This obviously isn't something you'll really notice versus the 12 Pro for everyday use, but it's something to note nonetheless. As rumored for months and advertised by Apple at the event, the notch has finally gotten a tiny bit smaller. Yeah, this is something that everyday users who aren't into tech a lot will likely never notice. It's such a subtle little change. And I don't want to talk a whole lot about the iPhone 14 in this video, but word on the street is that next year's iPhones will feature a hole punch camera and no notch. So we'll have to see about that, but for now we've got this relatively minor downsize. The notch was able to get smaller due to Apple re-engineering and reorganizing some of the Face ID and speaker components in the phone. So now the speaker grill is right at the very top of the bezel instead of in the middle of the notch. ProMotion is finally on an iPhone. Like, I can actually say that. It's been a long time coming, and I'm glad we finally got it. For those who aren't aware, ProMotion is a feature Apple first introduced for the iPad Pro years ago, and what ProMotion does is enhance the display's refresh rate. So instead of refreshing up to 60 times per second, it'll refresh up to 120 times per second. And perhaps just hearing the numbers doesn't mean much, but this is an extremely noticeable upgrade. Now there's a new level of smoothness and fluidity on the iPhone's UI that it's never had before. Everything is twice as responsive and a little bit quicker as well. ProMotion doesn't make your iPhone itself faster, but having ProMotion definitely makes the phone feel faster in almost every way. It's a really killer feature and one that I hope we get on all the models in the future. The refresh rate luckily isn't the only display improvement this time around, but it is a relatively subtle one. The 13 Pro and Pro Max now have an increased max brightness for non-HDR content. The displays on the previous models only went up to 800 nits of brightness for SDR content and up to 1200 for HDR content. Now the displays go up to 1000 nits for SDR content and 1200 for HDR. And while that isn't a massive jump, you can definitely tell a little difference. The 13 Pro definitely looks noticeably brighter in certain scenarios, and for days when you're outside and the sun is glaring above you, you'll now have a slightly improved view of your screen, which should be helpful. But outside of this brightness increase, the smaller notch and ProMotion, this is it as far as display upgrades for the iPhone this year. And these are all really solid refinements over last year's model. 120Hz is undoubtedly the most buzzworthy feature, but everything combined is a little S upgrade for the year. The iPhone 13s this year are featuring the A15 Bionic CPU, and this isn't the Intel to M1 upgrade that some may have expected, but there's definitely some noticeable improvements in general performance. The A15 features a new 6-core CPU with 2 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. And with that, you're going to see improved Geekbench scores by about 10%, and as expected, it's a pretty marginal upgrade, even on paper. There's also a new 5-core GPU and new 16-core neural engine. This is going to offer slight but somewhat noticeable improvements for video and graphical computing related tasks. As far as how the A15 feels compared to the A14 and the iPhone 12 Pro, there isn't a huge difference, quite honestly. The 12 Pro doesn't feel like a lackluster device next to the 13 Pro, and if you're a 12 user, the performance should quite honestly be the last reason you upgrade. The 12 series still feels so smooth and new. The 13 Pro is just refining that experience a little bit, but not a revolutionary upgrade by any means. They could have stuck the A14 inside, and for the most part, you probably wouldn't tell a difference for day-to-day tasks. The camera system is one aspect of the Pro iPhones that always improves in one way or another, and that is still the case with the 13 Pro and Pro Max. This time around, you're getting an updated ultra-wide-angle lens with even better low-light performance. You're now getting an f1.8 lens instead of an f2.4 lens on the 12 Pro, and this is definitely a nice addition as the ultra-wide camera is obviously the weakest performer out of the three. You can notice an improvement in low-light photos as well, and if you're interested in seeing a comparison between the 13 and 12 Pro, be sure to subscribe to the channel for our full review where we'll feature that content. Another killer feature is the addition of macro capability to the ultra-wide-angle lens, and there isn't any sort of special macro mode you need to enable either. You simply place an object close to the lens and you immediately see how close you can get to the subject. It's not insanely detailed like a macro lens that is intended only for macro use, but it's far better up close than what you get on any of the previous models. And the cherry on top here is that this feature works just as well for video as it does for photography. It's honestly a sleeper feature that I think people will appreciate a lot more over time. The telephoto lens on the 13 Pro has also seen some improvements as well. Compared to the 12 Pro from last year, you're now getting a 13x optical zoom in and 2x optical zoom out. So you've now got a total of 6x optical zoom range. And so now you're going to be able to have overall better viewability than what you had on any previous models. You've now got 15x digital zoom as well, and digital zoom isn't something I'd normally like to use, but it's cool to have a bit more range in case I absolutely have to catch something far away on camera. And then the aperture on the telephoto lens has been improved as well. You're now getting an f2.0 lens versus an f2.8 lens on the previous model, so low light performance should see an improvement. Smart HDR4 has also made its way to the iPhone 13 series, and this is Apple's automatic HDR processing system for photos. As far as the general benefits provided by Smart HDR4, I'm not really sure. We haven't investigated this too thoroughly yet, but so far I'm not seeing a very noticeable difference between the 12 Pro and 13 Pro as far as HDR performance is concerned. So it seems as though the benefits of Smart HDR may be more under the hood than stuff you can visually see. I'm surprised this feature wasn't introduced a long time ago, but the iPhone now comes with live photo filters courtesy of the new photographic styles feature. You've got a standard style, rich contrast, vibrant, warm, and cool photographic styles. And with each of these photographic styles, you can adjust the tone and warmth to get the best look for the current situation. Photographic styles isn't a revolutionary feature by any means, but I think it's cool that you're able to make edits to a photo before you commit to it officially. Cinematic mode is by far the biggest new feature coming to the iPhone's video system. As far as the way it looks, this is essentially Apple applying the same software they use for portrait mode photos to video. And when in cinematic mode, you can switch between the wide-angle lens and telephoto lens. But you can't use the ultra-wide-angle lens, and it makes sense as to why. One of the main features of cinematic mode outside of the portrait mode look is the ability to tap and lock focus on certain subjects. So whenever you move around the frame, the camera should maintain focus on whatever you initially tapped on. And this is a really convenient feature for those who want to track specific subjects when shooting videos. Cinematic mode also lets you adjust the flash, exposure, and depth of field. The lens isn't actually variable aperture. This is just a way to decrease or increase the intensity of the blur effect being placed on the video. And I think it's very smart of Apple to allow you to do this. I'll have more thoughts on cinematic mode for the full review, but I think overall this is a great feature for people shooting content for fun that they want to have some flair or add some style to. I also think it's cool that cinematic mode essentially forces you into shooting HDR, and that'll hopefully get more average users familiar with the concept of HDR and what makes it better than SDR content. And I want to give an honorary mention to the ProRes video recording feature that was announced for the 13 Pro and Pro Max. Just like ProRAW from last year, Apple announced this feature and got you hyped only to let you know that you won't have it out of the box. But this will allow for a less compressed recording codec that will fit perfectly in the workflow of a lot of videographers using Apple computers. I highly doubt ProRes in and of itself will look substantially better than regular video recording as far as overall image quality, but I think it's a nice feature that can actually cater to pro users. The batteries on the iPhone 13s have all been improved, as that was a pretty notable complaint with certain models, including the iPhone 12 mini. The batteries across the board have been increased by about 18%, 50%, and with that you should expect a pretty noticeable improvement in general battery performance. In addition to the battery getting bigger, the A15 processor has been further optimized to improve battery life as well. So far I haven't noticed a massive improvement in my daily usage of the 13 Pro Max, but I can definitely tell the difference, especially when you consider the fact that the Pros now have 120Hz displays. For those of you who want even more than 512 gigs of storage in your Pro iPhone, the 13 Pros have got you covered, as there's now a 1TB of storage option for the iPhone, which is honestly kind of insane. This isn't the first phone ever to have this much storage, obviously, but to think that you have potentially close to 1TB of storage inside your phone is kind of crazy. And so is that price tag. You could get an iMac for that kind of money. Overall, this isn't a massive upgrade to the iPhone, not quite like what we got last year, but all of the features brought to the table this time around are pretty solid, and I'd say the Pro phones make more sense to upgrade to than the regular 13s. You're getting the 120Hz display, better build quality, and all of the best camera features. We're going to be putting out a review of all the 13 models, so be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you know when those videos drop. And let us know in the comments what your favorite feature of the 13 Pro is. Mine is surely that 120Hz. It's been such a long time coming. But that's going to do it for this one. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.